Hello, and welcome to this installment of the Future Grind podcast. I'm your host, Ryan O'Shea, and today I'll be speaking with Justin Atkin of the Thought Emporium. The Thought Emporium is a popular YouTube channel that shares videos exploring scientific concepts and cutting-edge research on everything from nanotechnology to genetics and chemistry to biohacking. Justin also helps to operate Scihouse, the community science lab currently based in Jacksonville. He's an entrepreneur and scientist with active projects involving nanorobotics, genetic engineering, and more, which we'll definitely get into. As always, show notes and more are available at futuregrind.org. We're available on iTunes, Stitcher, and wherever podcasts are found. A video version of this episode is posted on Facebook and YouTube. Make sure to subscribe, and you can also like, comment, and share to spread the word. This is Future Grind. And now we are here with Justin. Justin, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks. Happy to be here.
So you do quite a few different things. You have the Thought Emporium YouTube channel, you're an educator, you conduct your own original research, and you help run the Scihouse. So how do you describe what it is that you do?
That's kind of a complex question just because of how many different things that I work on. So starting with the YouTube channel. The YouTube channel started when I was back in high school. Basically, I was frustrated that I couldn't find certain pieces of information readily available. And so I hit a point where I realized, it's the internet. If it's not already there, somebody needs to make it, and might as well be me. But then over the years, as I started to get more into the research side of things shifted away from really simple chemistry stuff to more showing parts of my research and the more advanced things that I do, and it seemed that people really liked it. So I've kind of just been continuing on with that. And the channel has been doing really, really well, actually. There's a couple of exciting things coming up that I suspect are going to make things go a little explodey. So I'm pretty excited about that. I've made a really big point of leaving it as open as possible. Like this week was building a freeze dryer, but some weeks could be like building a neural net, doing some physics stuff, or doing some bio stuff, or whatever else happens to be interesting.
So let's dive into the Thought Emporium here. How did that get its start, and what is it?
So the Thought Emporium was basically my attempt at taking the kind of loose collection of things that I was doing and making it a lot more professional. And I want to make this into a business. I want to make this into something I can be proud of. And so that's kind of how the Thought Emporium started. It's kind of grown from me and a friend making derpy TDCS units in our basement to one of the main areas where my research goes through. And also the Thought Emporium is really the basis for the channel at this point.
And you mentioned the diversity of topics you research. Everything from nanotechnology and genetics to physics and chemistry. But what would you say is your primary interest?
So I have two. So the two biggest things I'm working on are the supercapacitors and then the genetic stuff. The reason everything is as diverse as it is because my goal is to be able to outcompete lithium batteries. So to be able to do that without using lithium is extremely complicated. Literally the only way that that's possible is a very large amount of nanotech and chemistry and physics and electrical engineering, and it's just all these different pieces. The research necessitated all of these different pieces. It ended up with me picking up this really diverse skill set because it's literally the only way that this is going to work. So that's the kind of supercapacitor stuff. And then the other thing is the genetics work, and that is a lot more new. It's actually what I went to university for. I really wanted to learn how to do genetic engineering, but my school was garbage, so they refused to teach me. It was literally 3 years of genetics classes, and we were still doing Punnett squares. So at that point, I kind of went off. I ended up joining up with Gabriel Lucina, and so we've been working on a whole bunch of genetic stuff together. For example, I am extremely lactose intolerant. It has been a center point of my life for the last 6 years since the enzyme turned off. And so when people are like, hey, so why'd you go into biology? Do you want to treat disease, cure cancer? I'm like, no, man, I want to eat pizza.
Well, that's good motivation there. And all of these topics are covered in your YouTube videos, which many in my audience may be familiar with. But for those who aren't, what are a few examples of some things you've done?
Some of the really fun ones, myself and a friend of mine built a working radio telescope out of an old satellite dish that we 3D printed parts for, motorized the whole thing, and then took a picture of the sky in microwave frequencies so we could actually see the geosynchronous band of satellites sitting there in orbit. And then we took that radio image, overlaid it on a 360-degree panoramic image taken from the same location, so you could actually see the geosynchronous band of satellites in proportion to the Earth. So that was easily one of my favorites from last year. That was a big project. That took us like a month and a half to actually get working. There's a couple other physics ones that were quite good, approximating Planck's constant using just like a diffraction grating and some LEDs. There were some great bio ones. For those who don't know, there's this drink that's becoming really popular called Kombucha. It's a fermented tea. And as part of the life cycle of the organism, it produces this biopolymer at the surface of the liquid. And you can actually dry it out and turn it into a leather-like material that is ridiculously strong, like stronger than nylon. So I actually made a wallet out of that stuff, and I've been using it as my wallet for the last 7 months at this point. Those are some of my favorites, but it was really a diverse year.
So what do you have coming in the future?
So the big ones are the genetic engineering things, and I'm actually working on a replacement for magnet implants, because I've been really frustrated with the magnet implant crowd for a while. I would hop onto the biohacking boards, and all there is just magnets. It's just magnets all the way down. And it was really bumming me out. Like there's so much more potential, and that's all people care about. So it's like, well, you know what? If this is all people are going to be interested in, I might as well throw my hat into the ring kind of thing. There's something that really bugged me about the fact that you have a chunk of stuff in your hand. Like when I had my magnet, I could not sit still. I would just sit there and play with it because there was literally a rock in my hand. So the idea behind the improvement is it's going to be more of a tattoo than an implant. It's using tiny, tiny, tiny little particles that are hopefully magnetoelectric, but if nothing else, they're magnetic, or paramagnetic anyway. The idea is you tattoo them near where the nerves are. They're just the right size. They're big enough that they remain magnetic, and they're kind of flat. So they can kind of get next to your pressure-sensitive nerves and get really close to them so that when you're near a magnetic field, it causes the particles to torque, which is hopefully going to be enough to trigger the nerves. And because the particles are supposed to be magnetoelectric, which means they spontaneously generate an electric field in the presence of a magnetic one, it basically should increase the sensitivity to magnetic fields, because if you're near a magnetic field, it'll also be generating that electric field, so it should trigger the nerves with a smaller motion. So that way you can get away with having much, 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 much smaller particles and still feel the effect. And so we kind of tested it. I made the first batch and we stuck it into a friend of mine, but we only managed to get a little bit in because the particle size wasn't quite right yet. It was literally the size of a pin worth of material in his hand, and he was already able to kind of feel it. So we're going to need to do a lot more testing to make sure that actually works, because at this point I'm still skeptical, but with a little more testing I'm hoping that'll actually be something that can hopefully replace the bulky implants of the past.
What's the timeline on this going forward? Do you have another test planned?
Well, I'm waiting for my guinea pig to come back from Japan.
Okay.
So as soon as he's back and I've tweaked the formula, we're gonna go again. We're gonna find a local tattoo artist and see if they'll do the tattoo for us.
So does this actually go into the dermis where tattoo ink typically goes, or is it below that in the subcutaneous tissue?
It's really going to depend how careful the guy's control of the tattoo gun is. And also the particles are pretty small, so they're probably going to shift around. And also because they're magnetic, they will actually get pulled around in your skin. So their final resting place is not actually where you put them. They're small enough and they're magnetic enough that they do move around a lot. I actually posted a little video of the particles under a microscope moving around on my Facebook page a little while ago.
Yeah, I've seen that video and it's some interesting stuff. I'll link to it in the show notes at futuregrind.org so that people can check it out. Is this new magnet procedure planned to be visible in any way? You keep comparing it to a tattoo, but will it be noticeable?
It's very dark. You'll see it. It's a dark brown pigment. You'll definitely see it. I was hoping that it would lighten up a little because it's iron oxide coated in zinc oxide. So I was hoping that the zinc oxide would be a nice white and cover most of the brown. But when I looked at it under the microscope, the zinc oxide was actually perfectly clear, which was cool and kind of weird. So you could actually see the little pieces of magnetite embedded in the crystal structure of the zinc oxide.
One of the benefits of a traditional magnet implant is there was always an option of having it removed. Will that be possible with this type of procedure?
That is one of the pieces that we're not sure how we're going to do yet. Unfortunately, because of what it is, it's not going to break down well with a laser. We're working on it, we're thinking about it. And the nice thing is both of the materials that are being used, both the iron oxide and the zinc oxide, are bio-friendly. Your body uses both of those fairly regularly. So at this point, we're not actually sure if it'll persist or if it'll kind of break down slowly over time. So that's all part of the testing that we're going to have to do.
And you mentioned some genetic engineering projects you have coming up as well. Can you give us an example of one of those?
Really, the thing to be excited about this year is the genetic stuff we're working on, specifically a project to treat lactose intolerance. 65% of the population is lactose intolerant. Like, we should not be eating milk, but it's everywhere and it's delicious, so I'm not going to complain. You know, why did I go into biology? Because I want to eat pizza. Like, I've literally been talking about that for 6 years, and we are like a few days away from seeing if that works. So I'm quite excited because I get to eat pizza for science, so that's going to be fun. We actually found a paper talking about this where they built a virus that delivers a fresh copy of the lactase enzyme, and then we kept looking, and I found a kit. Like, there's literally like a kit from some biosupply company on the internet that just sells you all the pieces of DNA that you need to make this virus. We currently have it incubating in some cells. The cells should be producing little virus particles. Once the virus is made, we're going to harvest it, purify it, and then package it into a pill. Because really, like, the lactase enzyme is supposed to be in your small intestine. So we're trying to just like formulate the pill to make sure that it gets there. Literally, it's going to be 2 pills. So I take 2 pills, and then I wait 3 days, and then we see if I'm able to digest lactose. Of course, we're going to be doing some petri dish tests before we do that, but I mean, I'm pretty excited. And the nice thing about it is that even if it doesn't work, which there is a chance that it won't, the difference between it working and it not working is like 3 or 4 amino acids potentially. Like, the idea is that it's supposed to get embedded in the membrane and just be able to kind of work on the outside without having to exit the cell. But if that doesn't work, then all we have to do is add a little sequence at the start of the enzyme that tells your body to export it. So it basically would be constantly producing the enzyme and then releasing it into my small intestine. So that way, any lactose that's there can get broken down so that the subunits can actually get absorbed.
Wow, that sounds like really exciting stuff, and I look forward to hearing updates on that. And I noticed that many of these projects that you're working on have a lot of commercial potential, this lactose intolerance treatment in particular. Are you interested in entrepreneurship and building a business at all, or is this pure research for you?
Yeah, no, I absolutely want to bring that to market. There's a lot of people that it could help, so I really would love to see it getting out there. We have 10 projects going right now, like 10 genetic engineering projects. Those are just kind of like the starting ones, and I realize this sounds kind of like self-aggrandizing, but like we looked at the list of quote-unquote incurable diseases. Most of them are actually like one enzyme is broken. So if you can provide a fresh functional copy of the enzyme to the right part of your body, the disease goes away. So we're looking really closely at that kind of stuff, because I mean, I have obviously a real soft spot for people who have like eating disorders, and insofar as like they can't eat certain things or it'll hurt them or make them uncomfortable or kill them potentially. And those are typically actually some of the easiest to deal with because they're usually one enzyme. Like phenylketonuria, there's literally, you're missing an enzyme that breaks down a particular amino acid properly in the right spots. You end up with like ridiculously high levels of urea in your blood. Like, all of that is solved by one enzyme. So all we have to do is build a vector that'll deliver a fresh, like a functioning copy to your liver and like have it maintained. Yeah, hopefully something commercial comes of all of this.
And I know that you are a strong supporter of the open source movement. So how would you go about bringing a product to market? How would that work?
Yeah, it's all going to be open source. We'll tell you exactly how it works, and we'll probably put the plasmid onto Atkin.
That's great to hear. But can you articulate why open source is so important for you? Why do you feel that it's the right way to go?
Well, I mean, open source is really important. There is too much science that is locked down or held down with patents or trade secret or whatever else, and it's actually really impeding people's ability to do better and do good things. I mean, open source just has so much more use and function. Like the number of open source projects that people have been able to like take and run with are, innumerable. Because really biology at this point is where computers were 30 years ago. So one of the things that really helped the world of computers was all this like open source programming and tech and stuff. And so I really want to do the same thing with biology. Like I want to keep it nice and open so that theoretically anybody can pick it up and run with it and tinker with it and make it better. We're just a couple of people. Like our ideas are good usually, but unrivaled compared to the kind of swarm intelligence of 7 billion odd people. There's going to be somebody out there who's like, hey, wait, you can just tweak this thing this way, and all of a sudden it works way better. Or what about this other cool thing that you'd never thought of? So it's way better to leave it open source and like let people have access to it. So if anyone's gonna like take it and run with it, it's gonna be like one dude in his garage who's gonna like spend all of his time building up a lab so that he can do that thing. To which I say, good, have fun, enjoy. Like you'll learn some things. I like all the power to you. That's kind of my stance on that. I really like open source. I tried doing the patent thing once and like try to like keep the secrets to myself. It was awful and expensive and just a horrendous experience. I much prefer to just keep everything open source and just open access, and then it's just better all the way around.
Yeah, I totally agree. What I often say is that I would love to be the one to solve the problems that I'm working on, but at the end of the day, what I want is for those problems to be solved. Because once they're solved, we can all reap the benefits. So I'm all for working together for the betterment of humanity. But you have went a bit down the patent road before. I believe you had previously tried to protect your nanorobotics project, Firefly. What happened with that process?
Really, the idea behind the Fireflies was that it was a system that could go in, find your cancer, and then kill it. There were magnetic particles that had all this stuff stuck to them so that they were able to seek out cancer and stick to it. And because they're magnetic, you could get into an MRI and be able to see where the cancer is. Particles were going to be fluorescent so that when you actually like cut into the person, you can just shine a black light on it and like see the tumor. And also you can basically induce the particles to heat up and like cook the tumor from inside out. But actually getting all that to work was extensive. Unfortunately, it was not going to work the way that I wanted it to. I probably could have made it work if I really like dug in and spent 4 years on it. But the more we got thinking about it, the more we realized, there's probably an easier way to do this. It's something I would love to come back to someday, but it is too big of a project and too overcomplicated. All the stuff we're looking at now is like, here's a little piece of DNA, it makes your body encode this new antibody, and the antibody like hunts down only cancer, and your body fights it off and you're good. Like that's just fundamentally so much easier than trying to like mess about with aggressively complicated nanorobotics. But don't get me wrong, I would love to get back into nanorobotics and really get into it. The other issue with it was I got way too excited because it was my first really big project. And I had all these professors who were like telling me that I had to go patent it, except that patents are really expensive. And like even the lawyer who I was working with, it wasn't until we were halfway through the frickin' process when the dude like hands me the price sheet of what it actually costs to like defend a patent in a single country, not to mention like the world, but like a single country. It was like $100,000. Then you have the problem of the Chinese don't care. Like you can patent it to China, they still don't care. Like they'll still just like take your thing and run with it. So it got to a point where it's like, well, somebody's just going to take it anyway, and the patent is essentially indefensible. So why do I care? It kind of burned to lose a bunch of money on that, but it was a really good learning experience, and it really cemented in my head why patents are dumb.
And I know that Gabriel Lysina, who you've been working with on some of these projects, is also a big proponent of the open source movement. And the two of you are the ones behind Scihouse, the community science lab which is currently located in Jacksonville. How did that get started, and what's the goal there? And how did you end up in Jacksonville?
So we were doing some stuff in Brazil, and that didn't go super great. And we had a friend who lived in Jacksonville and was like, you know what, you should come here. Jacksonville's great. And maybe you can get a job at the Mayo Clinic here. And so it was inviting from that sense. But then we actually got here, we're like, okay, there were some details that you left out. In fairness, Jacksonville, like the price of living is very, very low, and the regulation on some stuff is also kind of lax. So it makes doing a lot of what we want to do actually quite easy. So Scihouse started as a makerspace. we're in this new city and we wanted to basically have a space where we could do our research, do the things that we wanted to do, but also teach. Being an educator is one of those things that has kind of seeped into my personality at this point. Like it's hard to not do that thing because I love doing it. We've got all this weird and wonderful information and equipment, and it seems really weird to just like sit on it and just keep it for ourselves. And so we're really big on open source and open access and all that kind of stuff. So it seemed like a really good fit to kind of build a workshop where we could, bring people in, like have people learning new skills and doing cool things and all that kind of stuff. Unfortunately, the building that we got set up in had a whole bunch of, let's call them quirks. So that made it really difficult to keep doing the makerspace thing. So we ended up leaving that location, and while we were kind of, putting things back together, another opportunity kind of came up, which was all this genetic stuff. And so Scihouse kind of shifted into doing that. We still do kind of the makerspace thing. Now we're doing like hardcore biology meetups. So it's like, do you want to learn how to do some genetic engineering? Well, once a month the lab is open, come in, we'll run a class. This month we'll do a mini prep and like extract some DNA from some bacteria. And then maybe next month we'll put that DNA into a different bacteria and make it like change color on light exposure or something. And we also like go around, we teach classes at certain places, like a local high school wants us to come in, teach a couple classes. So now it's rather than a makerspace that you come to, for the most part, we come to you.
And I saw some video recently of you putting together a new lab space. Is that the Scihouse lab that you work from?
Yeah, that is the new, very, very shiny lab. And that video honestly doesn't do it justice. And it has gotten a lot shinier since that video. Gabe is posting pictures pretty regularly. So if you want to actually like see what the lab looks like, look at his feed. Yeah, it is kind of the dream lab. It is all the things that I've always wanted out of a lab. We've got, all the equipment to do like really, really hardcore genetic engineering stuff now. I've got a room where I can do all my chemistry stuff, so I can work on my supercapacitors. And we actually had too much room. Like there were too many rooms in that building. So we ended up turning the back room into, it was originally just gonna be like the break room, because you can't really be eating in a genetic engineering lab. Like that's kind of hard no. So you gotta have somewhere to do that. So we were like, okay, well it'll be a break room. Then we're like, well, it's kind of empty in here. What if we do something? So now there's a rock climbing wall in there. And then our buddy was like, hey, I need a place to set up my recording studio for my music. Can I do that here? And we're like, yeah, sure. So now we've got like recording studio, biohacking lab thing, and it's awesome.
Well, that sounds like the perfect mix of things.
Yeah, right? It's like, guy's like, hey, I need a recording studio. It's like, well, I make videos. I also need a recording studio. This sounds great.
That works out perfectly. And I know Scihouse recently received its nonprofit status, but where do you get the funding from at this point? Where did the funding come from the lab? Is it self-funded, or did you receive grants or donations?
So there's another company that we've been working with who has helped push things along. They're the ones who've been interested in the genetic engineering stuff. As part of that, it helped to kind of push all the various bits of paperwork forward.
And how did you first get into science and technology? Was it encouraged in your upbringing, or did you discover it yourself?
It was something I discovered myself. My whole family are not scientists at all. I'm very much the weird one out. But it was one of those things, like when I was a kid, I wanted to be a wizard, and then I grew up and realized, well, magic isn't real, but science is pretty close, so I'm gonna go with that. But no, it was a lot of, I've always loved science. I love making things. I love tinkering. I've come to learn to enjoy collecting copious amounts of data and taking good notes. But yeah, no, it was one of those things that I've kind of always wanted to do. And I was lucky that my dad was very, very supportive of it. So when I was like, okay, I'm in high school, I would really like to have a little room that I can mess around with this stuff. Like, can I turn like the furnace room into a little lab? He's like, okay. In fairness, I'm really glad that I did it that way, because it forced me to get really good at salvaging materials from literally anywhere I could find them. That skill has paid off many times over, because it's like I couldn't just get chemicals. I could kind of get equipment. Like, okay, well, I need sodium hydroxide, and I'm in Canada where just buying sodium hydroxide is basically impossible. So it's like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to be extracting that from drain cleaner then. And so, I'd spend 3 days like cleaning that and getting it ready to go before I like do an experiment.
What is your relationship with traditional academia? How did your school teachers deal with your interest in science? And I know you attended university for a while. What was your experience there?
I mean, I've hated academia the entire time I was in it. To put it bluntly, I've always disliked it. Like literally since I was in elementary school, I was like, something about this does not feel right. I could appreciate that I was kind of learning things, but at the same time, I would forget them over the summer. So it's like, well, evidently you're not teaching me things that are sticking. Like, I love the science thing, but the available science was not that great. High school was better. I had a couple of teachers who were really supportive of what I was doing. My physics teacher specifically. She was very, very enthusiastic, very supportive. Beyond that, most just kind of thought I was kind of weird. Most of them thought I was just going to blow myself up, honestly. Which, luckily I didn't. And then I did university for a little bit. I got 3 years in before I kind of hit a point where I'm like, I can't do this anymore. All I wanted to do was learn one thing, and after 3 years, they had not taught me anything about like how to move DNA around in a lab, like how to work with it. It was all like, and this is how you use these population genetics tools. I did not come here to do population genetics. I just want to learn how to genetically engineer a thing. In fairness, like looking back, I can actually appreciate a lot of that. There is definitely some stuff that you just can't really get a good understanding of without some sort of university. So I definitely have my qualms with the university system. I think it is kind of silly in the amount of like extra grunt work. Like science should be taught as vocational training. Like it's ridiculous that it's taught as like now memorize every textbook we can think of, because you're going to forget it after the test in 4 seconds. And realistically, we carry around all of human knowledge in our pockets. What is the point of having an internet-connected cell phone if I can't just look up literally anything? It's really, I feel like the whole thing could be streamlined and cut down a lot. The most important things that university does is it teaches you how to read journal papers. And if it doesn't, then your university's not worth going to. Because if you're a scientist, you can't read journal papers, you've got a problem. And then the other thing is access to labs. Getting hands-on in a fairly professional lab and getting to use all of those tools was easily the most valuable part of my entire university education.
Yeah, I really enjoyed my university experience, but I agree that I don't think the main benefit was the knowledge I gained. The main benefit that I saw was the networking and the access to resources and opportunities. Because in today's world, knowledge is fairly democratized. We have libraries and the internet, and you can follow along with college courses for free online. But access to resources is still not easily accessible to many, and universities provide that. But one of the things you mentioned there is that some of your school teachers feared that you would blow yourself up. And thankfully you haven't, yet. I'm sure there's still time. But you do work with dangerous materials, and sometimes in non-lab settings. Have things gone wrong before? Were there any close calls with severe injury, or even worse?
Oh yeah. Oh no. Oh, absolutely. I'm a lot better at it now. I don't really play with that kind of stuff anymore, unless I like legitimately need to for research. Like unless I'm like making graphene oxide or something, like there's no reason that I'll ever work with explosives anymore. The really dangerous ones were mostly when I was more into chemistry and a little more lax on safety. It was really before I knew what I was doing. Was when I was at the most risk of like hurting myself, basically. I had one where I was trying to make sulfuric acid because I needed it for something and I couldn't get my hands on it. And so I was like, okay, I need sulfuric acid. How do you get sulfuric acid? I was like, well, if you burn sulfur and then pass it over red hot iron oxide, it makes sulfur trioxide. You put that in water, it makes sulfuric acid. It'll be great. Unfortunately, I did not plan my setup as well as I'd hoped. So what ended up happening, instead of the sulfur burning, the sulfur melted and then just started building up pressure in the chamber until the whole thing popped and sprayed face full worth of molten sulfur at me. Not fun. Would not suggest. So that was the thing. Luckily, I remained completely intact and that didn't actually hurt as bad as it could have. But after that, I learned my lesson and was significantly more careful. Well, actually, that's not true. I mostly learned my lesson.
Yeah, and I think that chemistry is particularly dangerous. If you're working with high voltage or explosives, you inherently know the risks. But with chemistry, you need to be very careful with byproducts. You need to know what chemicals react and what the result will be. Many times, these dangers are hidden. You're sometimes not sure when fumes are being released or what long-term exposure can do to you.
Yeah, it's the side products that get you. It's always the side. Like, I had another one. I was trying to make something totally unrelated, and I'm like, why is my flask getting really hot? And so, like, I went back and I double checked the research on the reaction. It's like, oh, by the way, the side product is a high explosive. It's like, what the fuck? Why don't you put that at the start of the article? So that was a deal with this right now kind of thing. It's always the side products that get you, like things that you're not expecting to show up. Because I mean, a good chemist will like do their due diligence and like check all of that, but like sometimes there's something you miss or something you're doing something new, and so you like don't know like one little piece of the thing, and it screws you in the end.
So I think I first met you at Body Hacks in Austin, Texas, when we were both speaking there in 2016. That's a conference that's focused mainly on human augmentation, and you've discussed your work with magnet implants, but what are your thoughts on the technological augmentation side of biohacking?
I'm about it. Like I'm definitely a biohacker. Really the thing though with that is that I've kind of hit a point where it seems like things have sort of stagnated. Everyone's kind of just doing the same. So that has really been kind of wearing me down. Or the people who aren't have all kind of like gone off to do their own thing. I mean, at the very least, it's like there's a lot less people active in doing things on like the biohack boards. I mean, I love Body Hacks. Like it was a great conference. I'm really excited to go back again this year because that was really fun the first year that I went. Made a bunch of good contacts, and there's always great people and like great things to see.
Yeah, it's a community. There's amazing people all doing interesting things, and that's why I love it. And speaking of communities, I would definitely say that YouTube is one as well. And you're absolutely a part of that with the Thought Emporium. What are some of the other channels within that community that you watch?
The one that got me started was Nerd Rage. If you haven't seen him, it's a guy, he only does chemistry, but he's like a PhD trained chemist. He's built himself up this like home laboratory, and he does really, really hardcore chemistry. And so I watched his channel. I'm like, I gotta get in on this. Like, I gotta start doing this stuff. This looked great. Kurzgesagt, or also known as In a Nutshell, is easily one of my favorite channels. I can't actually think of another channel who can explain things as well as they can, and just the diversity of topics. It's really quite impressive. ClickSpring is one of the most hypnotic things I've ever watched. It's a dude who makes clocks, but like he machines every single piece, and he built this like gorgeous skeleton clock, and now he's recreating the Antikythera mechanism, like that rusted to hell computer thing they found in a shipwreck. He has now taken the X-rays from that thing. He is like reverse engineering how some guy must have made this thing, and he's like building it as close as he can to the original and like making it work. And it's been just fascinating watching it. I mean, there's a lot. I'm a YouTuber through and through, so I get most of my media through YouTube. So there's a ton of channels that I watch.
Yeah, there's so much interesting content on YouTube. A few that I'll recommend are Vsauce, which is great for anyone interested in mathematics or exploring obscure concepts. I also really enjoy Cody's Lab and his science work. The Greek Gadget Guru is worth checking out. He takes weapons and tools from science fiction and makes them a reality. And Shots of Awe with Jason Silva is a good channel for small doses of philosophy, which I always like. But definitely, the Thought Emporium is on my list as well, and I always enjoy your content. I'd recommend that everyone subscribe to you there, but where else would you suggest that people find you online and keep up to date with your work?
There's also a Facebook page where I'll post some stuff. I'm also really big on Instagram. Instagram and YouTube are kind of the ones I use the most, because Instagram lets me kind of like take pictures of the stuff that I'm doing and just post it immediately. Whereas YouTube is, I've been working on something for a week or 2 or 6 or whatever, and I can actually like put it out as one complete package.
Well, I'll make sure to put those links in the show notes at futuregrind.org so that everyone can find you there. Thanks again for joining me on the podcast, and I can't wait to hang out in person again at Body Hacks.
Hey, you too.
Hey everyone, Ryan O'Shea again, and thanks for listening to my interview with Justin Atkin. Remember to check out the show notes and more at futuregrind.org. You can also like, comment, and share to spread the word. Till next time, this is Future Grind.